Malchus this year is from Tafshin Chaf Hey. Okay. Lahavin in times of Maraglim to be able to understand what the Maraglim were complaining about, what they were saying. Specifically, the Rebbe is going to address one particular expression that the Maraglim used, which was about Eretz Eicheles Yoshveh, about a land that consumes its inhabitants. So he says, they did not want to enter Eretz Yisrael. They said, that it's a land that consumes its inhabitants. So what does it mean, this idea of a land that consumes its inhabitants? So the Rebbe in this Maimer is going to approach it with two types of ways of approaching it. One is in a more, if you will, positive, and one is a more of a negative or lesser form of that idea. It says you have lahagdim levayra inyan the ara is batlas. There's a term used in the Zoyar that says that the land, ara is Aramaic for land, is batlas, means it is nullified. It is in a state of bittul. So what does this mean in the Zoyar? And by explaining the two explanations of the Zoyar about the land that becomes battle, he's also going to explain two meanings in a similar vein in the words in our parsha, Eretz Eicheles Yoshveh, land that consumes its inhabitants. So it says, this idea that the land is nullified and sublimated is similar to what it says, a land that consumes its inhabitants. There's two explanations in this expression of the Zoyar. The first explanation, this is that when the early kings of the world of Toyu, the spheres of Toyu, since they were very powerful and too intense to be able to withstand being together in the world, and therefore they caused a breakage of the vessels, a Shviras HaKelim, they are called the early kings, Malchin Kadmoid. Nafl B'Shviras HaKelim, when these early kings of the world of Toyu fell through the breaking of the vessels. So of those early kings, it's enumerated. There's like the 7 kings that broke, 7 spheres, the 7 midas primarily broke, the 3 midas, the 3 spheres of Chacham bin Adas rose upwards. So even though in general we speak about the 7 midas as a whole broke, but we're going to explain how Malchus wasn't so intense, the destruction, if you will, in Malchus. It says, so he says, Malchus Ara Rak is batlus mi only became nullified from its from its effect, but it wasn't an idea of total breakage. It wasn't something that was totally destroyed. It did not fall down in a breakage, meaning you can have a state where something is that it's a level that is broken completely, and it spills out all over the place, and the sparks fly all over the place like it did that fell to the lowest most levels, etc., etc. But with the sparks falling so low and so on and so forth, still in all, it did not completely have a level of breakage. I'm sorry, Malchus was only nisbatel. Malchus stopped. So he doesn't say ispatolas from the word nullification, a spiritual nullification, a level of bittul, like bittul ayesh, bittul mesias, but his batolas means from the word ceasing. It stopped its function. That's what happened to Malchus, as opposed to the spheres other than Malchus that broke. They were more than just they ceased their function. They broke and the sparks scattered all over, etc. And then he says, the Tamadover, what's the reason? That Malchus was distinct and it did not have that level of cessation and total breakage, etc., was because it was only it was only something that was Actually, let's see it inside. Because it had the level of yeshes. All the other spheres, like we said before, each one was like a king in its own right. Each one was very powerful. Since each one was very powerful, therefore they couldn't work together. They couldn't be in such a type of way where they would join together. So that made an explosion. That made the sparks shoot all over the place and break down and fall down here. The Inyan, this is only to be found in all the other emotional attributes that chesed could be so powerful not to stand gevura, and gevura could be so powerful not to be able to work together with the Tiferes, and the Tiferes can't work with Netzach, etc., etc. But Malchus, not on the level of Malchus, yesh more kach, because Malchus, even the way it was in the world of Toyu, is not such a strong yesh. Behind, though it is a level of yesh, still in all, it also has a level of bittul. And by nature, it can handle both opposites together. In other words, the problem, like we said in Toyu, was that they couldn't handle each other, they couldn't join with each other, but it has enough bittul that's able to take in opposites. Says, therefore, Malchus, there wasn't a total breakage and a total falling, from the Ares, but plus only in a way that the land was nullified, meaning that was nullified, meaning it ceased. That Malchus, which is known as the lowest of the 10 spheres, is called like the land. Is batless means that the light of its extension, of its expansion and manifestation ceased. It didn't expand. It didn't show itself in a revealed and functional level. Pirish Hasheni, the second explanation is the word like it's explained in the Torah. Inyan Hamsiris Nefesh B'Tefillah concerning self-sacrifice when it comes in davening, this battle until the entire power of the essence of the soul ceases, like a flame that rises on its own, to become consumed and to become cleaving in his light. So what happens in that occasion? For example, it says by Shema Yisrael Shem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, there's the idea of limser nafshi be'echad, that a person needs to give up and raise up his soul in a state of oneness with Hashem when he recites Echad. It says Shezeu Inyan Ares Batlas. That is already a more higher level than a much more higher concept of Ares Batlas. That the level of Oretz, the soul is considered like the Oretz, the Nefesh is like the level of Oretz, because it comes from Malchus, which is the level of Oretz, the lowest of the spheres, etc. So that is a level of bittul to the Eibishter. So instead of Ares Batolis, meaning the land, the level of Malchus ceased to function, which is a negative. Instead of that, and was talking about the world of Toyu. It's talking about our avodah. It's talking about a very great mysterious nefesh, where the person has such a mysterious nefesh that becomes totally nisbatli, becomes totally absorbed and consumed and subsumed in the Eibishter. So after explaining these two explanations in the term of the Zohar Ares Batlus, in regards and corresponding to this, there's also two explanations concerning the land that consumes its inhabitants. The first explanation is same like it's brought down the Torah of our parsha, top of page 12, that it was in their view, in the view of the Meraglim, and they went and they saw Eretz Yisrael. If there will be a revelation of the infinite light of Hashem down here below, how will there be that revelation? Through the fulfillment of mitzvahs in action, that will cause that the revelation of godliness, the revelation of the infinite light of Hashem, will be down here just like it's above. They will cease to be their entire being will cease to be. Excuse me. In other words, like this, they were saying, when we're in the midbar, we don't do mitzvahs in the physical. Since we don't do mitzvahs in the physical, we don't draw down such a powerful level of the Ein Sof. Only when we come into Eretz Yisrael, we're going to engage with the physical, as we will speak later on the Maimer as well. The idea that we're doing mitzvahs with the physical things causes the drawing down of the Ein Sof from an infinite high level. That infinite high level is too much for us down here, for people down here in this world to be able to handle. So therefore, we're going to become nullified, similar to the second pirush, as we'll soon explain. In Ares Batolos, the level of Malchus becomes, or the Nefesh becomes totally nullified and goes up in Mesiras Nefesh and Kriyash. And now he's going to bring it into the words Eretz Echal Yeshva. End of line 3. So that's what it means, that it consumes its inhabitants. Pirush Yeshva, what does it mean? Its inhabitants. Pirush just means like this: Yeshva ein toifsin makim la'atzmam klal. That its inhabitants, the people living here on the world, do not occupy any place for themselves. Mevatlim atzmam liyichuda yizbarach shebetachtoinim, and they nullify themselves to the Hashem's oneness and unity down here below, that they should be in a state that there is nothing besides. This is similar to the second explanation of the land being bottled, that the neshama goes up in a state of Mesiras Nefesh, that's a state of totally nullified entirely. And that's what they were concerned about, that through the revelation of the stuff through of mitzvahs, we will become totally nullified. Pirush Hasheni, line 9, the second explanation in Eretz Echal Yeshva. Let's explain the many Mambarim Bepirush Eretz Echal Yeshva concerning a land that consumes its inhabitants. That it means that the earthiness, the gashmius of the world will consume us and take away from us our ruchnis and make us be completely coarse and land-like and earth-like. That their complaint was they're being involved in action, in physical things, in mitzvahs and actions. That's going to make us coarse. Therefore, the Meraglim did not want to enter Eretz Yisrael. They lost it to be involved and engaged in refining physical matters, since they were fearful. In addition to the fact that they will not be successful in refining, first they were worried, we're going to deal with the physical. To be able to deal with the physical, I need to be like higher than the physical, and I'm raising it up. So first of all, I may not be able to even have the energy and the power to be able to raise it up. But worse than that, but just the opposite, they were concerned that being involved in physical endeavors, being in Eretz Yisrael, where you have to plant and sow and work for a living, etc., instead of being in the midbar, removed from physical things. So they were worried that this would spiritually hurt them. There's a yiplum madrigosam, that since through being involved in the physicality of the world, since engaging with the world while through being an Eretz Yisrael, will cause them to fall from their level. This is similar to, it's not exactly the same thing, but it's similar to the first explanation in the land Malchus ceasing. Over there, it means Aman is connected with the breaking of the vessels, as we will learn more so how it is similar to that concept. Any questions? Any questions? Any questions?
So you're saying Malchus was not affected by the breaking up of Torah?
It was, but not to the degree that all the other middas were. All the other middas totally shattered, and all the sparks went all over the place and fell very low, etc. But Malchus, because of its innate bittul, since Malchus has the greatest amount of bitl of all the spheres, like it's brought down in many Mamar Chassidus, that Malchus is the level of less lamigam maklum, it has nothing of its own, etc., etc. So because of that, the ego that was so strong in all the other spheres, even though it was the level of Malchus of Tayu, and all the spheres of Tayu had a certain type of holy ego, we'll speak about that a little bit soon. Still in all, it wasn't in such a powerful way that would cause a complete shattering of Malchus when it eventually broke, but rather the light of Malchus stopped functioning. In other words, it lost its function, but it didn't become destroyed. It ceased functioning and doing what every sphere has a function that's supposed to do. So Malchus also has a function. It wasn't able to do that function. But on the other hand, it didn't shatter and break and scatter sparks all over the place, etc.
Is this related to the fact that it's the lowest on the bottom?
That's part of it. The idea that it's the lowest and on the bottom means that it has that type of bittul, and either that's the reason why it's bottle, or that or that's a result of its bittul.
Just a side point or a comment, right, Bart? I don't know if you can relate to this, but I think it's more common in Baal Teshuvas. When you're becoming frum, this is one of your fears that, okay, if I'm going to become religious, I'm going to have to be put into the same box. Everybody's the same. I'm going to lose my identity. It's a lack of motivation to some degree.
Yeah, that's an interesting type of idea. But yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Like I cannot independently think.
It's not exactly this, but I hear what you're saying, the similarity. Okay, let's continue still on second page, Ois Vav, on the page Vav, Ois Beis, line 20. The idea behind this is, Reish Parsha saying, like explained in the Torah at the beginning of our Parsha, the Inyan Mohus Madregas Eretz Yisrael, concerning the very nature of the level of Eretz Yisrael. In other words, he's going to explain what's the advantage of going into Eretz Yisrael, etc. So he says all the mitzvahs and action, Ruban Kikulan Tuluyos Davke Eretz Yisrael. The vast majority of them are dependent specifically in Eretz Yisrael. We know of the 248 mitzvahs aseh that we have. There is only 86, 87, I don't remember the number, that we can only do at this time. Meaning, the majority of them we can't do now because we're not in Eretz Yisrael, because we don't have a Beis HaMikdash. It says, especially in matters having to do with agriculture, planting, things having to do with matters of the earth, where if you plant something in Chutz La'aretz, you don't have the dinim of, let's say, trumas and maestras and peya and shikha and so on and so forth, and matters having to do with karbonis, which is only the Beis HaMikdash, not Yisrael, or in the Mishkan, when it was before the Beis HaMikdash, and so on. Mamshich, and the Alter Rebbe continues in Kutei Torah, in the Ksiv, it says in the pasuk, that a person does not live by bread alone. The pasuk says, rather on everything that Hashem brought out from His mouth, meaning that's only by Hashem's command. That's the literal pshat. The literal pshat means that Hashem commanded and said that we should live. That's why we are alive, not because of the bread that we eat. That's the literal explanation. The Arizal, if I remember correctly, is the one that explains that Moitzi Pi Havaya means there's the Dvar Havaya, the Asara Amoris, that's inhabiting the bread. There's Asara Amoris that caused all the different types of produce to grow, including the wheat of the bread. And when we eat the bread, so we are eating and consuming and bringing the Dvar Havaya into us. So we are being sustained by the Moitzi Pi Havaya. We're being sustained by what Hashem said that is invested in this piece of bread, that's embedded in this piece of bread. So he says, so the Rebbe asks, the famous question that we need to understand, what is the advantage of the bread? You're saying that it has a dvar avaya, so we also have a dvar avaya. It also says that the Eibishter said, "Vayomer Hashem nasa adam." Adam nivra maimer. Also, a person was created by the saying of Hashem, by the utterance of Hashem, which of course, like it says, "Nasa adam chulu." Let us make man. So that was also one of the Asara Amaras, one of the 10 utterances, what was created in the world. So why do we need a different utterance? Why do we need to have the moitze pi avaya, that which came out of Hashem's mouth, to create the bread? What is that better and stronger for me to be able to get my sustenance from, more so than if I would get it from directly from from what's already in me? Why do I have to get? I have already the Maimon Hashem in. Why does a person specifically need to receive his life from the bread if he has that Maimon Hashem in him? Then the Rebbe adds to that even more so, because in the hierarchy of things, we know that the creation is divided into a general hierarchy of doimim, tzemeach, chaim, medaber. There's the inorganic, there is the living, the vegetation, then there's living animals, and then there's human beings. Now, the very fact that we have that 4 different levels externally, it's indicative of each one having a different type of life force other than and different than the one higher. Obviously, something that's inanimate, inorganic, like doimim, its life force is so much weaker, as evident by the fact that it's practically not evident, versus vegetation, that you could see some type of life to it, versus animals, where you can see even more life force. A human being that has even intellect, so obviously the life force is even more powerful over there. So how could it be that the highest one and the highest pinnacle should need to have the life force in the lower strata? Same as even more so, the top of page Zion. How is it possible that how is it possible in the power of food to give life to the person? The bread is a level of growing things. And the earth from which the bread comes out from is a level that's inanimate. So everything involved with the bread is of the lowest levels. It's vegetation, and even lower than that, it's inorganic and doimim, it comes from the minerals in the ground, etc. On the other hand, the spectrum of a person is a speaking being, meaning he has intellect and therefore he has a higher level of life force. So it says, if so, how can vegetation give life to the speaking things that's totally higher than it? But the idea behind this is because that which comes out of the mouth of Hashem, that's in the inanimate things and in the vegetation and in the living creatures. Where does their life force come from? Where does their nefesh come from? Their soul comes from? They all came from the 288 sparks of godliness and divine life force and energy that came from the world of Tayu. But the Adam, on the other hand, that they fell through the breaking of the vessels. Adam, on the other hand, the human being, his life force comes already from the world of Tikkun, which is lower than Tayu, from Atzilus and below. Therefore, since they have a higher energy, it says they can give life to the Adam. Therefore, a person specifically needs to receive his vitality and his energy and his life force from the inorganic, from the growing things, and from the living creatures. Because the root of these 288 sparks is very high. That is the reason why they fell so low. Like it's known, the famous metaphor, the analogy of a wall that falls down. And when a wall falls, so the further from the wall is where you see that topmost stone or brick from the top of the wall. That the stone that's on the top of the wall falls further than a stone from the middle of the wall or a stone on the bottom of the wall. The same thing when you're dealing with the 288 sparks. They fell very, very far, and they fell even into the most lowest creatures, the daimim tzemach chai, not in medaber. Before the matter is explained in the Arizal's writings, when his bar Baruch B'Teres Chassidus, and explained at length in the teachings of Chassidus, Hacham B'Teres Abal Shem Tov Rabbeinu Zaken, beginning from the teachings of Abal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe, V'chein B'Drush Rabbi Sein Messiah and Shalachers, and it's also explained the Amarim of the Rabbeim following them. The Amarim of my father-in-law, the leader of our generation. Based on this, it's understood the great advantage of entering Eretz Yisrael, to engage and to be involved with physical matters, because through refining physical things, that their root is very high, that their root is in the world of Toyu, that's higher in the world of Tikkun, comes down a very exalted and high level of light. It's idea of drawing down the essential light of Toyu. That's what we do when we perform mitzvahs. So that this very lofty light should come down. Then it's possible that because the great quality and advantage of the light, so then they will become totally nullified. So that concern is only if you are actually engaged and dealing with it in the appropriate type of way. It says, Toyu It's only when we refine the physical things than which the sparks of Toyu entered in and were enclosed in. So in other words, the fear of having this great type of light is only possible when you have a very powerful level of that's revealed. If the light is not revealed, if the energy is not revealed, so then you're not going to have anything what to be concerned about. So when is that powerful energy of Toyu revealed? When you engage with the physical things. Concerning this, the Meraglim complained and said, we cannot do it because he is stronger than it, that because it's stronger than him. And the Chazal say, Al Tikri Chulu Kivyachol Klapem Maila Amrum, top of page Ches. Do not read it that they are stronger than us, but actually Chas v'Shalom, they were saying that the nations are stronger than the Eibishter. In this case, we are applying it concerning Toyu and Tikkun. They said even the owner, Eibishter is the owner of the world, can Chas v'Shalom not take out his vessels from there. In other words, not get rid of these nations. That's what they said, the Meraglim. What does this mean spiritually? The vessels are referring on the vessels of Toyu, that they broke and the sparks fell down below. And the Balabais is referring to the level of Tikkun, that the Tikkun needs to refine and extract its vessels from, in other words, the sparks, which is the vessels. So Tikkun wants to take the sparks of Toyu. So we're saying Tikkun is, they said the Balabais can't take out its vessels, meaning that Tikkun cannot take the sparks of Toyu. Toyu is too powerful for Tikkun. Tikkun can't handle it. Pirish ain't a Balabais Yaakov. What does it mean that the owner cannot take out his vessels? It's not in the capability of Tikkun to refine the sparks of Toyu. Because as we know, the lights of Toyu are few in comparison to the great lights of Toyu. It's brought down that in Toyu it was Oris Merubim, great lights, and in Tikkun it was Oris Mu'atim, and vice versa in the vessels. And therefore they are very weak. And therefore, how can they conquer Toyu? But the Torah, as opposed to the lights of Torah, are many and much. Therefore, they are very powerful. And being that they're very powerful, it's impossible for Tikkun to overcome Torah. And that was what the Meraglim said. You want us to go into the world of Eretz Yisrael and deal with the physical things and bring godliness over there by revealing the worlds, the iris of Toyu in there? We can't do it. Tikkun does not have that power to overcome Toyu to be able to help and cause that revelation. Any questions?